Well, today is Wednesday. It is October the 6th. And this is a little bit of a departure away from my daily devotionals, but I think it's a necessary one to address a ongoing issue in our society, but to do so in a biblical, spiritual perspective. And I decided I would do a video simply because I have a concern that somebody would read this article and take it out of the context of where I desire with my heart for this to be. So the title of this letter or blog post is Ministering to a Woke, W-O-K-E, Culture, a Biblical Perspective. And so I pray that you will sense the heart of a shepherd in this without a political agenda, but looking at something from a spiritual perspective. Now, for the article, shaming has become a perpetual practice of the political left in the 21st century. Really, with little regard for historical fact or context, militant agitators have been fomenting unrest in our society, trumpeting a narrative of cultural and generational guilt. Politicians, educators, news organizations, religious leaders, corporations, social media moguls, and even sports teams are all in lockstep pushing a woke agenda, driven by a socialist political ideology. They are demanding justice and reparations for what they describe as the poor and disenfranchised. Well, what is the woke doctrine that we're hearing so much about today? Well, risking being accused of oversimplification, the adherents of woke doctrine place on one generation or people, albeit countries of origin, race, religion, whatever, the burden of bearing the responsibility for the sins and the failures of earlier generations. Woke doctrine is being taught in schools, adopted by corporations, demanded by human rights movements. Woke is the ideology of Black Lives Matter movement and its demand for reparations. Woke ideologists, they condemn the United States as an imperialist nation, and they accuse the USA of egregious crimes against humanity and of oppressing the less fortunate people and nations of the world. Now, I am one who loves history, and an elementary knowledge of the United States history, particularly that of the 20th century, reveals the USA has been the lone superpower that, though not perfect, has been a rebuilder, not an occupier of the conquered and the downtrodden. Now, militant woke liberals are demanding that the United States and its citizens must right our wrongs, even if that means punishing this generation for the alleged sins of past generations. Now, several questions come to mind. Must a nation and people pay for the sins and failures of previous generations? Must we, the people, be impoverished to amend for what others contend are our national sins? Does a massive transfer of wealth to impoverished nations and people, does it fix the failures of the past? And so my question is, what does the Bible say? Is there a spiritual principle to answer a woke culture? Can one generation bear the guilt for the sins of past generations? Do sons and daughters have a moral obligation to compensate for the failures of their fathers who went before them? Well, the Word of God does have an answer to this controversy. And it's stated simply in Ezekiel chapter 18 and verse 20. We read there, "The soul that sinneth, it shall die." Now listen to this next phrase. "The son shall not bear the iniquity of the father, neither shall the father bear the iniquity of the son. The righteousness of the righteous shall be upon him, and the wickedness of the wicked shall be upon him. And so what is the spiritual response to the woke doctrine of love and reparations? It is, now listen, that every generation bears responsibility for its choices, whether those choices are lawful or lawless, righteous or wicked. When a generation chooses righteousness, they enjoy God's favor. When sons and daughters choose wickedness, they bear God's judgment and will suffer the punishment of the wicked. Now, are the sins of past generations the burden of sons and daughters? And the answer is absolutely. We read in Lamentations 5 and verse 7, our fathers have sinned and are not, that is, they are dead, and we have borne their iniquities. Well, that would seem to be in conflict with the earlier verse in Ezekiel. Well, let's consider it. While sons and daughters bear the burden and the influence of the sins of their fathers, they cannot be lawfully punished for the failures of a former generation. Such a demand is not only unjust, but it violates the Scriptures and God's righteous judgment. Deuteronomy 24 and verse 16. Now, should the church and its members then look upon human history and acknowledge human rights violations? Do we as believers concede the failures of generations that have gone before us? And the answer is absolutely. But here's the closing point. It is God, not man, that is judge. God does not condemn one generation for the failures of another. The proponents of woke doctrine might be sincere, but from a biblical, spiritual perspective, they are wrong. One generation does not, should not bear the consequences of the choices of an earlier generation. That is God's will. God bless you, my friend. I hope you'll find your way through this world that is so bent on anger and sadly self-destruction. God bless and bye-bye.